My next guest is Drew Welton. Did I get that right?
Yes, sir.
Drew is the Vice President of Sales for a company called Intellirent. I've seen Intellirent around. I know what you do, but that's not what we're going to talk about. We're not going to talk about the products of Intellirent until the end. Yeah. Drew, one of the reasons that I wanted to have you on here was your passion and your purpose at Intellirent, and your focus tends to be on transformers. Transformers are a big issue right now. Lead times are getting out 4 or 5 years. But there's another part of this whole thing, and I want your perspective, because as a career, you're looking at all of these customers. You see a lot of customer needs and how they do what they do. Mm-hmm. Then you got to take it back to your company at Intellirent and say, oh, this is what the company needs. Before we start talking about that and the getting together, I want to talk about change. Mm-hmm. I've been in the transformer business for 15 years. Mm-hmm. I have seen more change in the last 2 years than in the other 13.
Correct.
And it just seems to be getting worse. It's not getting better. But talk to me from your perspective as a thought leader. Mm-hmm. What do you think's been changing in the last couple of years?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's certainly a delight to be here and be able to have these conversations. I think it's very important. The one thing that I see in change, and of course change is consistently happening within our industry, especially in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
But as it relates to transformers, transformers have a tendency to age quite well if they're well taken care of, and we mitigate things like excessive moisture. But what I see in terms of change is there are certain things that take a while with new technologies for the industry to embrace.
Okay.
Now, I've been on the IEEE Transformers Committee now for about 8 years as a full member, and we put a lot of effort into updating standards, not just design standards on new transformers, but also on things like field testing and diagnostic testing. And a lot of work and a lot of industry experts really contribute to this. But the problem that I see is not everybody that owns a transformer or works around transformers embraces some of these new technologies. And that's kind of the issue that I'm faced with. As somebody in sales, what I like to do is make sure that when you're a NETA-type testing company or a service company, that you're doing this work on a transformer for a customer, that customer understands exactly what you could bring to the testing process. And I see a disconnect there at times. So it's a little bit troubling. And I'll give you a good example. Back in 1997, some research was done at the University of Stuttgart in Germany with regards to dielectric frequency response, or DFR as we commonly refer to it. And this is a method, of course, to measure the percent of moisture content in the solid insulation of the transformer itself. Now, this is kind of an advanced technology in terms of doing moisture assessment or water assessment, as opposed to doing a DGA and a ppm analysis. Okay. Because what happens, when a transformer cools down, the moisture that's in the oil moves back into the insulation.
Right.
And you don't capture that information in a DFR. And if you don't have the proper recorded temperature of the oil at the time you take the sample, your equilibrium curves are going to be way off and very difficult to assess. We've had instances where we've taken 5 samples at the exact same time on the exact same transformer, sent them off to 5 different labs, and get 5 different total different results in terms of PPM.
All good labs, by the way, right?
Oh,
They're
absolutely.
all validated labs.
It's nothing wrong with that. It's how did I take the sample?
Yeah.
When did I take the sample? Moisture in oil is not the same from various levels of the transformer. Right. It's water has a tendency to sink. So moisture assessment in an oil sample really is not the best way. So dielectric frequency response is a technology that many would consider new, although it's been around since 1997. And I've gone out to many field technicians at utilities and asked them about DFR and whether this is part of their test routine. The majority of them don't even know it exists.
Can it be tested energized?
No, this is an offline test. It's a low voltage, low impact offline test.
Okay.
That actually is very easy to perform. It's not scary whatsoever. Okay. But the other is in terms of power factor testing. And of course, power factor testing gives us an indication of the overall health of the insulating system in a transformer.
Right.
But this is typically performed here in the U.S. at 60 hertz. Well, a lot of new test equipment that does power factor can actually vary the frequency of that voltage signal. And in that range of, let's say, 0 or 10 hertz to 60 hertz, two things can happen. You can have an extended or a higher power factor value or lower. If it's higher, this is an indication that we have what's called conductive losses. Now, conductive losses could be furans, it could be sludge, but could also be moisture. Okay, so if the power factor measurements are lower, that's an indication that you don't have conductive losses, and if your ppm samples coincide with that, you've got dry insulation. So further investigation into that wouldn't be needed, but if it is showing a higher value in your power factor, I would always recommend DFR, regardless of what the ppm is telling you.
So Drew, you're the vice president of sales and you're geeking out on detail, okay? Which I love, by the way,
Sure.
because I think educating the market, and that's part of what we need. We already have some things, monitoring, diagnostics, machine learning from that. We already have some things that are there that are not being used. So when we talk about innovation, if we can use the innovations that we've done and we have and apply them, we won't need to find the next magic bullet and focus.
Correct.
And I think that's a big part of it. So it gets me to the next question.
Sure.
That's all about educating the marketplace. And that seems to be the problem. How do we educate the marketplace, and at what level? Who are we educating? Are we educating managers? Are we educating substation managers, engineers? How do you educate? As you said, there were some technicians that didn't know.
Yes.
How do we educate the technicians?
Well, that's a very good question, and the answer is all of the above.
Okay.
And it starts with those that are developing standards in terms of when to test, how to test, what to test. And, there are decision makers, and I'll give you a good example. As a testing company, let's say you're a contract testing company or a needed company, and your salesperson, goes into the asset owner, whether it's a utility or an industrial account, and they want to contract somebody to do their routine testing.
Okay.
So the gentleman who defines the specification for that test hands it to the salesperson for the testing company and says, here's the test I want you to perform. How much is it going to cost me?
Right.
Because low bid gets the job. Right? So where the breakdown is in terms of that testing company, that salesperson saying to the customer, well, I see you have this test, and this test. What about moisture mitigation? What do you plan on doing for that? And he says, well, of course, if you look at the spec, it says do an oil sample, and that's what we're going to look at. So instead of the testing company explaining DFR or dielectric frequency response or any number of advanced testing that is available in the industry, they just go what is specified.
Right.
So you have to get to the person who is writing the standard. You have to get to people at a management level that understand the importance of why we do this testing, and a lot of that has to do with life extension of that asset. Because as you know now, the supply chain for new transformers and lead times is way, way greater than it ever was in the past, pre-COVID.
As much as 5 years for the large power transformers. You can imagine the more complicated ones even out there. And having talked with and being part of TMAA, they're part of our association, it's not going to get better anytime soon. It's only going to either get worse because of the demand. Just the demand from the data center world is heating up. Right?
Oh, absolutely.
So there's all of these stresses on the industry. And in one part you think, well, that's really good for the industry. In another part it's the danger part of this.
Correct.
we just had Jim McIver, who was retired from Siemens Energy, and he used the word we have an existential threat.
Yes.
And I don't think we raise the alarm enough about, hey, guys, you just can't keep doing. There are tools you can use to do better.
Yes.
For life extension.
Yep.
And today, life extension of transformers, to me, is as important as new manufacturing, because you can't get the new ones. You better keep the ones that you can.
Absolutely.
And you better decide which ones are the ones you keep. Right?
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely. And the three things that will degrade the insulation of a transformer more than anything: heat, oxygen, and moisture.
Moisture, right.
You combine those three things together, you've got a time bomb ticking.
Sometimes I wonder, and I'm not going to pick on the utility industry, but we've been teaching that heat, moisture, oxygen, and there's we don't test for moisture. Yeah, we know when we heat it, we know when we run it above rating.
Yeah.
And they just kind of leave out one of the most important tools in there, that moisture is damaging the paper.
Yes.
Life of the transformer is the life of the paper.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's switch gears a little bit. Sure. I want to talk about Intellirent. Tell me about the company. Tell me when it was formed.
Well, Intellirent was actually formed by a gentleman by the name of Dave Gibson, and he was the founder of Intellirent. And he started the company back, I think about 17 years ago.
Okay.
And what Dave did was recognize the need to have technicians access to any type of electrical test equipment that they would need, and make that a rental transaction rather than having to spend a lot of CapEx. I mean, test equipment is very expensive.
Yeah.
And if you're either a young technician starting up your own field service company, or even a large testing organization such as Shermco or Voltex, CapEx isn't easy to come by.
Right.
And not only that, but you have equipment, it all comes down to utilization. So let's say you're a utility or an industrial or even a small testing company, and you have to do, let's say, partial discharge testing.
Okay.
Now, you could spend over $100,000 on the equipment to be able to perform that, but if you're only going to perform that 2 or 3 times a year, renting is the obvious choice.
Right.
And so what Dave did was, his very first passion with regards to being a rental equipment provider was to make it not just a transaction. Okay, it's a relationship where not only are we going to provide you the equipment, we'll have it there when you need it, where you need it, on time, fully working, fully functional, and we'll also provide you the support if you run into problems in the field. Okay, and that's the big differentiator between, because it's not, and this is no criticism on our equipment manufacturers, but sometimes support when you're in the field is difficult to come by. So that's the sort of thing that we pride ourselves in. We don't just send you the equipment and say, hey, it's yours, do what you want. We washed our hands, we'll stop the billing when it comes back. No, that's not what it's about. We have a host of technical experts on hand to help customers through that process.
Is there any training that you provide because
absolutely
making sure that you know that they know how to use it?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I spend a great deal of my time, and people ask, well, why does a rental company need a VP of sales? You're not really selling anything other than the rental process.
Yeah.
What we like to sell is education.
Okay.
And I spend a great deal of time. I've probably given, I'll probably do at least 7 to 8 different presentations, technical presentations this year at various conferences, and also to the private testing companies.
Yeah.
Okay, they want to know, and they're, sometimes they're thirsty for education, but other times, and this makes our life a little bit challenging, is they think they know everything. They've been in the industry for 35 years. Yeah. I don't believe in DFR. I don't even know what that is. Yeah. So, if the customer doesn't put it in his spec, I'm not going to do it,
right?
Because it just means time and money. So yes, we do a considerable amount of training and education. And part of my
So
responsibility.
we should change your title, because I saw on your tag here that you were, I can't remember what it was. But
I don't either. They got it wrong.
they got it wrong, but it was really more about training and education,
Yes.
doing that.
Absolutely.
Last question.
Sure.
TechCon.
Yes.
You've been to several TechCons.
Absolutely.
The value of TechCon to the industry.
Well, again, it's all about education.
Right.
We come here not to come and have a good time, although it is a very good time, and it's so important to be able to network with colleagues in the industry, because if you come in with a mindset that I'm coming here to learn, okay, then it all makes sense and it all makes it worthwhile.
Yeah.
Herman and his team and the TJH2B folks do an excellent job in not only pulling in people like myself that have been in the industry from a vendor standpoint, but also the utilities that are faced with these issues from day to day.
Yeah.
So education is just the priority number one in terms of this particular conference. And since it is focused on transformers and transformer diagnostics, you can come with an open mind. And the one advice that I give to people that come to these conferences is take it back with you.
Yeah. I moderated a panel yesterday. I was pleased to do that. That blew my mind. I mean, a panel on physical security of electrical assets.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And the 270 rifle events, people shooting at transformers, some pretty bad ones that happened, and the utilities that shared, they actually scared.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought, this is crazy that we have to worry about that, and I don't think people understand the magnitude of it. And on the other end, what they have to do to mitigate it. And some of the smaller munis are going to be, they're not going to have the same assets that Idaho Power or maybe SMUD can, because they're big, but PG&E. But that was not about transformers, but that was about what's happening in substations, what's happening in the world.
Oh, absolutely.
But brilliant knowledge that if they don't take back, guess what? It's just going to go nowhere. But I agree with you. The training they do here, the panels they do here, the presentations they do here. This is my first, and we've now made a pact with Herman.
Yep.
And we're going to be doing it again, and we'll be doing these interviews there again. But Drew, it's been a delight. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Yep.